Week 10 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few running backs I looked at off the wire this week. The first back, Tajay Spears of the Tennessee Titans. He's been outplaying Tony Pollard over the last few weeks. Is Tajay Spears, and Tony Pollard's been a name that's been in the rumor mill that might get traded before Tuesday's deadline this week. So the last few games for Spears, week 6 at the Vegas Raiders, 5 carries, 31 yards, 4 catches, 19 yards. Week 7 versus the Pats, 5 carries, 22 yards, 3 catches, 18 yards. Week 8 in Indianapolis, 9 carries, 59 yards, a touchdown, 3 catches, 23 yards. And week 9 versus the Chargers, 7 carries, 26 yards, 3 catches, 36 yards. So even if Tony Pollard does stay and doesn't get traded by Tuesday at the NFL trade deadline, Tajay Spears, I still think, is a better receiver out of the backfield. And we know this Tennessee Titan team, they're going to be trailing in more games than not the remainder of the season, even though in week 9 they did play a close one versus a good Charger team. So with the bye in week 10, I still will go out there and get Spears. Like I said, especially if Pollard gets traded, you got a starting running back right off the wire and ready to go week 11, and he's available right now in 55% of fantasy leagues. Next running back, Facial Tootin of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Tootin, he got more touches in that ball game, and I've said this in other videos, rookies usually get more touches after their bye week, where obviously Jacksonville had their bye in week 8 and they won in overtime 30-29 in that back and forth battle in that ball game at the Vegas Raiders. So the last few weeks for Tootin, not much to say before week 9. Week 6 versus Seattle, 2 carries, 14 yards, 2 catches, 14 yards. Week 7 versus the Rams, 5 carries, 22 yards. And then week 9 at Vegas, 9 carries, 29 yards, a rushing touchdown to give them the lead in overtime, and a catch, -3 yards. So Tootin had some hype, obviously, in the offseason and preseason for fantasy football. Then also Tank Bigsby was there, but they traded him quickly into the season to the Philadelphia Eagles. And now Tootin, obviously, is going to start getting more touches, it looks like, with him and ETN in that backfield. So with all those factors and out there in tons of fantasy leagues, it's 67%. Tootin, definitely a running back to add this week. The next running back, the mentioned Tank Bigsby of the Philadelphia Eagles. So we saw Saquon Barkley in the week 8 victory versus the New York Giants pull up short in that one and hold the hamstring, and he didn't return, even though he said going into the bye week in week 9 it wasn't serious. But to cover bases, Tank Bigsby, he's out there in 74% of fantasy leagues, and we'll see what the practice reports say going into this week here with Saquon Barkley. But like I said, right now, if Saquon Barkley isn't 100% or not good to go, Tank Bigsby could step right in for this Philadelphia Eagle team, and he's capable of handling a decent amount of touches. So week 7 in Minnesota, carry 11 yards, a catch, -1 yards, and then he came in relief for Barkley in that game and had a big performance, 9 carries, 104 yards. So this week, if he does get into a role, if Barkley's out, it is a tough matchup at the Packers that give up the second least amount of fantasy points to running backs on the season, even though we just saw Rico Dotto go out there in Green Bay and have a big game. But like I said, if Barkley's out, Bigsby's going to step in to one of the better offenses in the league and get good volume, and he's available right now in tons of leagues at 74%. Next running back, Dylan Sampson of the Cleveland Browns. So the thing is here as well, Junkins, he was day-to-day going into the bye with a shoulder injury, and if he's got to miss time, if something happened during the bye or it just didn't heal right for Quinshon Junkins, Sampson's going to step in as the running back, and he's available right now in 84% of fantasy leagues. And also, I think Jerome Ford, there's a good possibility he gets traded before the Tuesday deadline. So with those factors, and if Junkins is out, Sampson will be the next running back here for this Brown team. Week 6 at Pittsburgh, 3 carries, 12 yards, 2 catches, 12 yards. Week 7 versus Miami, 3 carries, 8 yards, a catch, 9 yards. And week 8 at New England, 3 carries, no yards, but he added 5 catches, 29 yards. So Sampson, a better receiving back than obviously running back in between the tackles. Week 10, it's a good matchup at the New York Jets that can't stop anyone and give up the 15th most fantasy points to running backs on the season. But like I said, he's only a good add is Sampson if Junkins is out, but obviously we're not going to know until practice reports open Wednesday here where these teams start practicing. So if you need a running back, well, obviously got a bench spot and possibly want to get a lottery ticket, Sampson will be that ad this week. The next running back, Isaiah Davis of the New York Jets. Isaiah Davis, he had a good showing, and he possibly could step into a role, even though it doesn't look that likely Breece Hall gets traded at the NFL trade deadline, but you never know where this Jet team's 1-7 and obviously going nowhere this season. And who knows if they want to really pay Breece Hall big money with their team not contending and have other team needs to fill as well. Week 6 versus Denver for Davis, 2 carries, 2 yards, catch -1 yards. Week 7 versus the Panthers, 2 carries, 10 yards, 2 catches, 22 yards. And week 8 at Cincinnati, 7 carries, 65 yards, 5 catches, 44 yards, and a 2-point conversion. So Isaiah Davis, good receiver out of the backfield. Jets, they're going to be trimmed regardless if Breece Hall was there or not a majority of the season and the rest of the season, I would say. And like I said, also as well with Brandon Allen out multiple more weeks for the Jet team. Davis is the backup, and if Breece Hall does get traded on Tuesday here, if he's going to step into a role, is Isaiah Davis is the starter. So with all those factors, and he's out there in 88% of fantasy leagues and getting playing time regardless, he's definitely a back to add this week. The next back, Blake Corum of the Los Angeles Rams. So Blake Corum, he got some good work, even though it was a blowout victory, 34-10 versus the New Orleans Saints in the Week 9 victory for this Ram team. And we also saw Kyren Williams get 25 carries, 114 yards, and a touchdown. So Corum, in my opinion, one of the better handcuff running backs in fantasy football. But the last 2 games, his touches have gone up here for Blake Corum. Week 7 at Jacksonville, 12 carries, 37 yards, a catch, 6 yards. And then Week 9 versus New Orleans, 13 carries, like I said, 58 yards, even though the thing is both those ball games will blow out. So Week 10, this should be a closer game at the Niners. They're playing great football as well. They give up the 13th most fantasy points total backs on the season. But like I said, Corum, he's more of a handcuff running back. And right now, he's available in 91% of fantasy leagues. Next running back, Devin Singletary of the New York Giants. A lot of people assumed Tyrone Tracy would be the guy, and Singletary wouldn't get much touches in this backfield, even though this New York Giant team, they were down early and often. So Tracy had eight total touches in that one in the loss versus San Francisco 49. And Singletary, he had 10 total touches. So obviously Singletary more touches in that game, and he had the better runs in between the tackles, and he's a more physical back than Tracy. So the last few games for Singletary, Week 8 at Philly, where he came in, 2 carries, no yards, a catch, 28 yards. And then Week 9 versus the Niners, 8 carries, 43 yards, 2 catches, 8 yards. So Week 10, a good matchup at the Bears. Give up the 8th most fantasy points to running backs on the season. But the only thing is, I think they're going to be trailing to the Bears early and often. And Singletary's not that great of a receiver out of the backfield. But like I said, he out-touched Tracy in that game. And the Giants, they were down double digits in that game as well, majority. So with all those factors, Devin Singletary, the veteran, he's definitely a running back to add off the wire. And surprisingly, not many people picked him up, even with the Scatterbo injury out for the season. And he's out there in 95% of fantasy leagues. And running back Chris Rodriguez Jr., Washington Commanders. Chris Rodriguez, I know some of the carries were garbage time, but he looked like the way better back in that game versus Seattle Seahawks in Week 9, where Krosky Merritt, he didn't really do much. He had 12 carries, 65 yards, and a touchdown was Rodriguez Jr. And we've seen some flashes from him on and off this season, but just consistent carries haven't been there. But Krosky Merritt really hasn't taken this backfield by storm over the last few weeks, where now it looks like is possibly could be a committee, where Krosky Merritt in the game had 13 total touches, even though he was in and out, and Chris Rodriguez had 12 total touches, but carried the football over 5 yards per carry. So Rodriguez right now out there in 96% of fantasy leagues. Coming into the year, I thought he'd have more of a role, especially after they traded Brian Robinson away to the 49ers. But it's definitely something to keep an eye on. Rodriguez, he was running hard and making plays for this Commander team, even though they were down 3-4 scores a majority of this game in Week 9. So Week 10 in the matchup versus the Lions, where obviously they're going to have to put a lot of points on the board. We'll see how this backfield shakes out. But like I said, anytime a running back goes out there and puts up some decent numbers, he's someone that's going to be on the waiver wire, because running backs are tough to find, and there's been a lot of injuries at the position this season. And they'll find a running back, Terrell Jennings of the New England Patriots. So Terrell Jennings, he filled in. Ramondre Stevenson, he was out in the Week 9 victory versus the Atlanta Falcons. And Jennings, he had 12 total touches, with Trevion Henderson since 18, so not a bad split in the backfield for Terrell Jennings. Right now, he's still out there in 99% of fantasy leagues, and definitely someone to keep an eye on if Stevenson's out long term. So Jennings, Week 7 in Tennessee, 5 carries, 18 yards. Week 8 versus the Browns, 2 carries, 15 yards. And then Week 9 versus Atlanta, 11 carries, 35 yards. Touchdown, a catch, 9 yards. He had some juice on the ground with Jennings. He hit the holes pretty good, I thought. Week 10, it's a matchup at Tampa, but give up the 11th most fantasy points to running backs on the season. And I think Jennings, he could go out there and he could make plays for this New England Patriot team. But like I said, if Stevenson's back, he's going to be down to the third running back on the depth chart, with Trevion Henderson splitting and being the number 2. But if he's still out, Stevenson, Jennings is someone to pick up off the wire. So we'll see what happens this week with the practice reports. But Jennings, like I said, he looked good running the football for this Patriot team. And him and Henderson could handle the backfield from what we saw in Week 9. So that's a few running backs I looked at off the wire for Week 10 of the fantasy football season.